Hey, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Poultry Keepers podcast. Got a question for you. How much do backyard poultry keepers really need to know about genetics? In this episode, Mandelyn, John, and I are going to break down the basics, like what is genotype versus phenotype, dominant versus recessive, what is test mating, how to identify faults and disqualifications. You're going to learn how to apply practical genetics to improve your flock and select quality birds. Coming up in just a few seconds. Okay, guys, I got a question for you. How much do folks really need to know about poultry genetics? What's your thoughts, Mandelyn?
It depends. On the one hand, if you're not breeding, you don't need to know that much about it. But on the other hand, if you have questions about the birds you have and why they may look a certain way, why they may behave a certain way, the breeding behind them can answer those questions, and the genetics that you're working with, it'll answer a lot of that.
I agree.
Yeah, knowing where your birds came from and what their potential was designed to be is super important, and whether or not they're appropriate for your local environment is always a consideration.
I learned early on that if you're showing poultry, they are judged by phenotype. In other words, what the birds look like, not what their genetic makeup is. Yeah, and you can have two birds that look really close, but they can have entirely different genetics. Because really, there's no way to judge genetics unless you have a little DNA readout. But I just want to throw that out there as why breeders of exhibition poultry don't really focus on genetics that much.
That's interesting. Does that mean that people can show, say, something that is not a Rhode Island Red as a Rhode Island Red if it meets all the qualifications of one?
Absolutely.
Huh.
If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck.
Well, I guess you don't have to show any sort of pedigree at a poultry show.
No, you don't. You don't. And that's why you're talking about Rhode Island Reds. We have Rhode Island Reds and Rhode Island Whites. You know why they're treated at shows as two separate breeds and not a variety?
Curious.
I believe it's because they had different ancestry.
Exactly. They were developed from entirely different kinds of birds.
But in the same area, thus the name.
Yes.
Crossover.
But anyway, I digress yet.
And there's the cushion comb white I've heard about, which, if you're not careful, could look strikingly similar to a Chanticleer if she has small wattles.
Oh, that's true.
Absolutely. They even had cushion comb rocks at one point.
That's right. You told me about it. Okay, so that can happen, but is that bad? Is that faking? Is it a no-no? Is it accidental on purpose?
It depends on what circle you're in, because there are purists out there, and then there are people who think it looks correct. So to me, it doesn't really matter unless there are certain genetic traits within a breed that are supposed to be there. Like for my flock with the American breast, we're supposed to have intramuscular fat. And so if you got a white chicken with blue feet, is it still a breast if it doesn't have the fat? Because the genotype is different than the phenotype. And it's this whole can of worms.
And there are a lot of factors that can affect expression of the phenotype.
Absolutely.
And I've often said you could take the same dozen eggs and hatch them and raise them a mile apart under different care and have very distinctly different chickens.
Yes.
Right.
Result.
That genetic expression can be influenced by not only their feed, but their environment, husbandry methods. The same genetics in different locations can do dramatically different things.
Okay, let's cut to the chase here. How much does the average poultry keeper need to know about genetics? Do you need a degree in genetics? No, I don't think so. But
I think you need to know that you got a good foundation and
A
have-
working knowledge, yes, absolutely.
know that you're starting with good genetics.
Yeah.
You need to know enough about genetics to ask the right questions of your breeder and know you've got a good starting point. And then just the basic knowledge of how to keep it alive. It's not hard. We've been doing this for 3,000 years as farmers.
Yeah, just the rudimentary of the basics within the breeds you want to work with, because it's not going to be knowledge that you can attain quickly. And if you do have a degree in it, how specific is it to poultry? Or was it just the college overview? And then it
That's
doesn't
enough.
go into breed by breed either. So knowledge of the breed you're working with really helps.
If
Thank
you're
people-
starting with a pure line, that's all you need to know is the basic college stuff. What is a Punnett square? What is Mandel's hierarchy of inheritance? And you're good to go. It doesn't need to be. That's actually, in my day, we learned that in 9th grade science, but I understand it's taught at a college level now.
I think what confuses a lot of people and they get going down the wrong path is they think that poultry genetics works the same as mammalian genetics, and
No.
not even close. Poultry genetics are very different. So, yeah, a good working knowledge will take you a long way, and it depends on what you're breeding for too. Mandelyn's breeding for productivity. Some folks breed for exhibition,
Right.
and
But
some
she's
folks,
also breeding for line development.
yeah,
Uh,
and some folks are breeding just for backyard
Barnyard mix.
sustainability.
What is
So
it called?
each
Barnyard
one has
mixes.
each has a slightly different perspective about how they approach genetics and breeding. So, one's not right more than the others, and one's not wrong more than the others. So, just whatever you're working on.
I believe it goes back to what are your goals?
Yeah, for sure. And if you put 10 breeders into a room with the same group of birds, they're all going to make different breeding decisions. And some of them are going to want to know the genetics going back generations, and others are going to say, I don't care about the genetics. Show me the bird in front of me. It just depends.
And I'm glad you brought up breeding goals because, like I said, some folks are focused on different things: egg production, meat quality, temperament, or show standards. Mandelyn, I know you've been down this road before, but how do you feel? No, not how do you feel. How would you explain that some traits pop up unexpectedly in hatching projects?
Oh, that's a fun question. So, the more diverse your flock is, the more variables you're going to see them express. The more individual birds you hatch from, each individual bird is going to bring its own genetic profile into that incubator or the broody hen, however you're hatching them. So let's say, for example, you've got one male and 4 females. Each of those 4 females are going to produce different results. And if you put all of them together and hatched them as a group, and you start seeing maybe foot color's a little weird on this one. Maybe there's some feather color sneaking out on these other ones. Maybe the comb did something. Maybe the structure was different. The growth rate was different. And this is just a small group of 5 birds total, but you're seeing a range of expression. And that's going to tell you 2 different things. If the birds themselves were pretty similar and you're getting results all over the board, that means they were not consistent when you started. And they're still holding a lot of variables within there. The other thing it's going to tell you is you should have been pair hatching so that you can pin those results down to the pair and know which female was producing the better results and which females were giving you less than desired results. The more birds you're using, the more variables you're probably going to see. And that's going to tie directly into the level of breeding work that was done with them before you got them.
When I was first getting into poultry, I was taught that is they used the term refining the flock. And it's just getting rid of the junk and keeping the good stuff.
Yeah. And you have to hatch and see to figure out who's throwing the junky ones.
Yes.
Because the parent birds may look pretty decent themselves,
Oh,
but they
absolutely.
may not produce what you were hoping to see from them.
And a lot of folks think to eliminate a problem from a flock, if you've got a cross going there and you don't like, suddenly you have a wild card pop up. and they think that the way to get rid of it is just keep removing those wild card birds from the flock. Really, the way to get rid of it is to remove the wild card from the flock, but also the parents that produce the wild cards, because they're carrying some recessive genes.
It's those recessives that'll sneak out.
Ooh-wee.
And
Because
they
what
gang up on
recessive
you.
gene, we should explain what a recessive
Oh,
gene
yeah.
is. So,
Oh, yeah.
I got one more thing I want to get into, and then we're
Okay.
going to talk about dominance, recessives, and polygenetic traits.
yeah.
But we banded around genotype and phenotype, but we really haven't explained very much what that is.
Yeah. We jumped right
Genotype
into it.
is genetic makeup. It's what's in the DNA, including hidden traits.
What's the bird capable of?
Yes.
Genetic.
Phenotype is the physical traits that you can see. It's what you actually see in a bird. It's what it looks like. You can have two birds with the same phenotype, but they may have very different genotypes. That's why you can mate together two really good-looking birds and get a bunch of junk in the offsprings. Okay, dominant, recessive, and polygenic traits. Share your thoughts with us on that, Mandelyn. Dominant.
So dominant means, hold on, let me go back to the beginning of my brain.
It's the
Let's
name.
say you've got a pair of birds. One of them has a lot of dominant traits. For example, a rose comb is a dominant sort of comb.
Yes.
The other comb types are more recessive, and that recessive part means they have to have two copies to get the expression of that into their phenotype. But if they're with a bird that carries dominant traits, those dominant traits are going to win out over everything that's a recessive trait.
In other words, a single copy of a gene is enough to cause it to express in the offspring. Okay. A recessive trait means that it takes two copies of the gene, one from mom, one from dad, for the trait to express in the offspring. Recessive traits are things like white skin, chocolate coloration. Those are two that come to mind.
Silver
Right?
down on chicks.
Yeah,
Something I'm looking for.
Now, polygenic or polygenetic traits, they are things that are controlled by multiple genes. And this is where it's really easy to get into the weeds on this. But things like body size, egg production, the amount of leg feathering if they're a feather-legged breed, or the intensity of the eggshell color are all multi-genetic traits, polygenetic traits. And best example I can give you is that if you look at Cochins, Brahmas, and Langshans, which bird has the most profuse leg feathering?
Say the Cochin.
The Cochin, yeah. And if I remember correctly, and I may be wrong, but there's three genes that control the expression of the degree of leg feathering. They have all three of them. The one that's sort of in the middle of the road is the Brahmas. They have two copies of that gene. And the ones that have the least amount of leg feathering are Langshans. They have one copy of the gene.
I wonder if that's true for the Marans too, then, because they're just supposed to have just a light little trail of feathers down there.
They're sparsely feathered, well, I wouldn't say. The standard defines Marans as feather-legged. It defines Langshans as lightly feathered, which means that the Marans have much less feathers.
When I think of polygenetic traits, the classic example to me is the Cornish cross. As repulsive as it is as a poultry keeper, and it is literally designed through how many layers of generation to get the final Cornish cross, and it requires a very specific combination of polygenetic traits to produce that bird in the end. And if any one of those is not present, the cross can't exist in its
Correct.
final form.
It's fascinating.
It is. And it's designed inherently to be non-self-reproducing as part of it. Because, yeah, it's a fascinating but scary world of genetics sometimes. because we have an
Really?
entire industry or pretty much a world now dependent on this very specific genetic combination. And if any single part of it fails, things happen.
And there's basically 2 breeding farms that control all of the genetics, which is even scarier to me. But Mandelyn, talking about polygenic traits, have you discovered any of those in breasts?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of differences in growth rates that can be observed within the breed. And I'm still going through the process of learning what kind of birds produce which result with the other types of birds. Because the first thing my little squirrel brain did was push them to the genetic variables because I wanted to know what all is in here. Oh, there's a lot in there, actually, as it turns out. So now I'm going through finding how the genetics play off of each other and how to do the selection. And I've been working on a double mating situation between different sizes. And that's giving me some neat results. And then I have to do it again to confirm what I think I know. But I don't have that genetic DNA paperwork on them. Like, it's not like I sent blood tests to the lab asking what all is in here. I'm doing it by phenotype and then mix and match to see what I get from the genetics within the flock.
Do you know
And
of
then
anybody that's
so
done
much.
genetic testing on breasts?
Only for color so far.
Okay. Okay. And that's another can of worms. But
Yeah. There has been interest in getting them tested for the fat marbling because it is a recessive trait. And having that testing, if there's labs performing the certain tests for the certain genes, first they have to be mapped, though, to even have that data available.
Has that
and
been
that can
done?
get
I
pricey.
don't think so. Not that I've heard of, but it'll be pretty neat if they do, because then everyone can go, what's your test results say about your flock?
Hey, somebody's got the money to pony up for some CRISPR time.
Yeah.
Test results. That brings up another topic. Testimating. Mandelyn,
Yep.
I know you've done a lot of that. John, you've done some of it.
Sure.
John, what's been your experiences with it? What are you trying to do with test mating, and how are you working that?
I pedigree mate very specifically. So I put a rooster and a hen together, or at least up until this year, it's been a single rooster with 2 hens in a single pen, but I can tell their eggs apart. So I knew what genetic combination was what. And if it was working, throwing great chicks, and they looked good a generation down the line, then I know that was good. And if not, hopefully you have a way to backtrack out. But it's
Well,
all
test
about,
mating.
yeah, seeing what they throw. I'm looking for silver down chicks specifically. So I'm looking for the magic combination where I put this rooster with this hen and I'm getting 100% silver down chicks. That's who I want to hatch from this year.
Test mating to me is telling me who's carrying what that I can't see. And it does take keeping a bird that shows the trait you're wanting to test for. Like early on in my breast flock, there was a big issue with slipwing to where it was almost half of the hatch results. And I'm like, what is this sloppy wing thing? So I did research on the trait. I found out it was a problematic recessive trait, and I needed to keep birds that showed it so I could test the birds that didn't show it. And now, years after that, I hardly see it at all anywhere as I systematically work through the birds. And not seeing it, man, that's a relief. And it was test mating that showed me who my closet carriers were. Because while that bird itself didn't show it, it still passed it.
Those recessive traits and those recessive genes, they can be the dickens to breed out of a line.
But it takes
Sometimes they
generations
won't even show
sometimes
that
to
they're there
express.
for at least 3 generations.
Exactly. Exactly. Have you done any test mating for silver and gold?
No, but I need to.
Yep.
And base color underneath the dominant white. I need to start checking for that too.
I tell you, white can hide so many other colors.
White can hide everything.
Yes. I inadvertently created some barred leghorns one time
That sounds fun.
because commercial white leghorns are hiding barring.
Huh. Now, sometimes the recessive traits aren't a bad thing. They can bring a whole new variety out because you found something neat and then bred those together. Like sometimes there's a silver lining to finding weird stuff. It can spin
Oh,
off into something
absolutely.
else entirely.
It's how you, now whether this is right or not, this is the way I explain it a lot. It's when you take some recessive and breed it over and over again till it actually works like a dominant genetic trait.
Yes, like frizzles
Yes.
Allele stacking.
or single combs.
Fun stuff. So, what about lethal gene carriers?
I was thinking about asking that because I'm not familiar with what those are in poultry.
Probably the best known one that I'm aware of is Japanese bantams. And it's another one of those polygenetic traits. And when, they're fairly short legged birds, if they don't have that gene, they've got long shanks. Okay. If they do have one copy of it, they have short shanks. But for some reason, when the chick is carrying two copies of the short legged gene, it dies in the shell.
Whoa. So that's some serious breeding strategy to get your desired result without doubling down on it.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of these mutations, because basically that's what people have done is they've selected genetic mutations, but if they're put together in certain combinations, it can definitely produce some lethal results. High mortality rates in the shell, a failure to develop, failure to hatch, severely deformed chicks.
You don't run across a lot of instances of that, but it does happen when lethal genes are at play. It's a recessive characteristic, and two copies of it is, like it says, lethal.
Yep. And as we mentioned before, the Cornish cross that's part of its design.
One of the recessives within the Cornish cross is the dwarf gene. Shorten those bones.
Yes.
They have the dwarf gene, I believe, twice, which makes it inherently lethal. And there's another gene combination that also makes it inherently lethal. And I can't think of that right now.
And because
I think it was a double breast gene as well.
Double muscle gene, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't do my homework fully.
I know that one of the things when you breed Cornish cross together, you get about 25%, 20 to 25% are dwarfs. All of them are dwarf, genetic dwarfs.
And they're growth rate.
I can't fathom keeping a Cornish cross pair alive long enough to mate.
Some people have done it, but they don't keep them confined either. They're allowed to get out and roam around.
Oh, see, every Cornish cross I've ever seen has been incapable of movement after about week 16. They should have been harvested a long time ago. Yeah. And it's almost becomes an animal cruelty issue for me to see a bird that old.
Definitely don't keep them on a hillside. They'll just roll on down to the bottom.
They get down to the bottom eventually and they can't get back up. Yeah.
Gosh, that sounds like me with my back.
Sometimes. I hear you. My friend L4.
Let's talk about identifying faults, flaws, and disqualifications.
Yes, especially from a judge's perspective. I need
that.
to hear.
That's a big problem for folks. And if you look up in the standard of perfection, it lists disqualifications and it lists fault. And I'm constantly asked, is a disqualification a recessive trait, or is it a polygenetic trait, or is it dominant? Most of the disqualifications, all of the disqualifications, are dominant genetic traits. And they're considered disqualifications because they're things like skeletal deformities, like right tail. Okay. Once you get that established,
there's no getting away from it.
And once you get it, and the reason it's a disqualification is because back when the standard was written, there was a lot of emphasis on production qualities of what the carcass looked like. Mandelyn, you'd be familiar with that. And if you start getting all those crooked tails and crooked spines, the public doesn't want it.
Nope.
That's why they make it a disqualification.
Which is good, too, because even with the bird walking around the yard, it's not pretty to look at.
No. we talked about flaws. Flaws are, I tend to think of flaws as more cosmetic issues.
Like a lot of the comb stuff, like single combs can have a lot of different little things from side sprigs to conjoined spikes to the blade hugging on the back of the skull instead of coming off in a nice straight line.
See, the side sprig is a DQ.
That's out.
That's the
Because
dominant
it's
trait.
coming off sideways.
No, because poultry used to be sold with their heads on.
Yeah.
The breasts
They did.
still are sold with their heads on in France
In France,
to
they are,
prove
yeah.
that they're breasts, yes, and to prove their freshness. A customer will look at the eyes to see if the
But I
eyes is
think of
cloudy or
flaws,
not.
and you two are going to be familiar with this, is brashiness in white birds.
That's
Yeah.
why I'm looking for silver down.
That's a flaw. It's not a defect. It's not a disqualification. It's a defect.
Still tastes fine.
Color faults versus structural faults. To me, the most critical ones to eliminate, and the ones that are going to cause you the most problem, are structural fault,
For sure.
because that leads to problems with walking. That leads to, it's a direct link to body capacity,
That's your viability.
where just the visible little flaws here and there, color flaws, and they drive you nuts trying to get them corrected. If you really want to, Mandelyn, if you really want a challenge, start raising you some silver-laced Wyandottes.
No thanks. Been down that road.
We ride past that farm, actually. My neighbor has some silver-laced Wyandottes, and they are amazing. They also
was
have the
offered
only
some-
Dutch spots in the United States. They had them imported as embryos last year. That's
I was
all
offered a
genetics
really
thing.
nice looking group of silver laced Wyandotte. And they were originally from Foley's line, but they were several owners removed from that line. And the color grabbed my attention. I was like, oh, that's a nice looking bird. But once I started looking past the feathers and past the color, then I started looking at the little bit of structure that I could see. And I saw how close together the legs were. And I saw how little the heads were. And I was like, no, that's not going to be my kind of bird.
You
I
pick
bet
the
they're
bird
pretty
up.
flat.
If somebody hands me a bird, I either go, whoa, that's light, or whoa, that's nice.
Yeah, there's
And-
a certain heft that I'm looking for.
Yeah,
To
exactly.
me, you were talking about the color. Color breeding is a much bigger headache.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Poultry Keepers podcast, where we explored how understanding poultry genetics, even just the basics, can help you make more informed decisions about your backyard flock. Whether you're selecting for egg production, color consistency, or strong structure, genetics play a practical role in building a healthier, more predictable flock. If today's episode helped clarify terms like genotype versus phenotype, dominant and recessive traits, or gave you confidence to try test mating or selection, we'd love to hear about it. Don't forget to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode, and please leave a review. It helps other poultry keepers find practical, trustworthy content like this. Until next time, keep observing, keep learning, and remember, you don't have to be a geneticist to raise great chickens.